Well, hello everybody, my name is Roger and welcome to my channel, Rogers Reads. So today I'm doing my December mid-month wrap-up, which is part one of the books that I've read during the month of December. I always switch it up into two parts, so I usually try to do the first part in the middle of the month and the second part towards the end of the month or the beginning of the following month. So, the first book that I read this month was entitled Mr. Frosty Pants by Lena Blake. Now, this is a gay romance story and was actually my first holiday read of the season. So, Mr. Frosty Pants follows Casey, who, when he left for college, ended up ghosting his best friend Joel. And that was 4 years ago. So Casey had just come out to his parents, which didn't go all that well, and he decided that he didn't want to go through the same thing with his friend Joel, so he just went to college and cut him out of his life. It's also worth mentioning that he was, and still is, very much in love with Joel, and didn't want to risk Joel finding that out. Now, as for Joel, he's curmudgeonly, ill-tempered, and pretty much unapproachable, so much so that his employee at the hardware store that he owns has nicknamed Joel Mr. Frosty Pants, hence the title. Now, Joel initially comes across as a wholly unlikable character, but given that the story is told from alternating points of view, we learn the reason for Joel's standoffishness. That is, he's been severely hurt in the past by his despicable and abusive father, leading to an overall feeling of unworthiness on his part as he struggles to merely survive day by day. We also learn that Joel is not quite as straight as Casey believes him to be, and that he's also been in love with and pining for Casey for many years. Still, when Casey shows up at Joel's door with the intention of renewing their friendship, Joel wants nothing to do with him and gives him more than a frosty reception. He certainly has no intention of telling Casey how he really feels about him and does his best to drive the man off. Joel thinks that Casey has no place in his life now, especially given that they come from two different financial, social classes. Casey from new money and Joel struggling to try to afford his next meal. It's also worth mentioning that Casey's snobbish parents also do not approve of Joel and their son's friendship with him. So Joel believes that it would be easier on his heart if he kept Casey at a distance. But Casey is not so easily rebuffed, especially once he learns from a mutual friend that Joel may have romantic feelings for him as well. What follows is a sweet, slow-burn romance with two very complicated characters, as Casey is determined to win Joel's trust, whereas Joel is determined to keep that gate protecting his heart firmly closed. Add to that the class differences, homophobic parents, and elitism. We quickly see that it's not going to be an easy road for our main characters. Now, I typically really enjoy the friends to lovers trope, and this novel was no exception. And I thought it was a lovely story about opening one's heart and taking a chance on love. So the next book that I read in the month of December was entitled An Absolutely Remarkable Thing by Hank Green. Now, I've been following the Hank and John Green's channel for years, the Vlog Brothers. So I was really excited when I heard that Hank Green was coming out with a book of his own. So, An Absolutely Remarkable Thing. This book follows a 23-year-old bisexual girl named April May, who is on her way from work at 3 o'clock in the morning when she notices a giant sculpture that seemed to have appeared out of nowhere. It's 10 feet tall and resembles a giant transformer wearing armor. So April calls up her friend Andy to come down, and the two of them create a video of the sculpture, name the sculpture Carl, and then upload it to YouTube. So much to April May's surprise, she learned that overnight her and Andy's video has gone viral. But not only that, the Carls have appeared in cities all over the world, identical to her New York Carl, as she so dubbed his name. But Being the first to document the existence of Carl, April May is thrust into the spotlight and soon becomes a social media sensation, appearing on numerous television shows and becoming quite wealthy in the process. So the story really picks up steam as the world gets closer to solving the mystery of the Carls, while April May tries to keep her life from spiraling out of control. It's also worth mentioning that the world is basically split into two factions, pro-Carl and anti-Carl, with April May being the center of it all. I thought that this was really an endearing book with quirky characters and a quirky story, which provided an eye-opening social commentary on obsessive social networking, internet fame, or any type of fame for that matter, the ego, and the horrors of extremism. I actually recorded a full review of this book, which I'll post on this channel in the coming days. So the next book that I read in the month of December was entitled A Ghost for Christmas by J.D. Winters. So this is a cozy mystery that follows a main character, Melee, who, recovering from a bad breakup, decides to visit her aunt, Baby. But when she arrives, however, she finds a dead body at her aunt's doorstep. As it turns out, the corpse was a wealthy vineyard owner who was pretty much despised by everyone who knew him. He was also trying to steal her aunt's business, which made Melee suspect whether her aunt may have had something to do with the man's murder. So Melee, along with the help of two ghosts and a local detective, get closer to discovering the identity of the killer. Of course, once the killer learns that Melee is getting closer to discovering his or her identity, Melee's own life becomes in jeopardy. So this was a fun, light little mystery with no real violence or gory bits. I was a bit disappointed, however, given the title, as I thought that this would be more ghost-centric, but that really wasn't the case. Now, there were two ghosts in the story, but they played a very minor role in the story, only appearing a couple of times. I was hoping that from the title that the ghost and the holiday would be central to the story, neither of which was the case. So the next book that I read in December was entitled The 7.5 Deaths of Evenlyn Hardcastle. It's also titled The 7 Deaths of Evenlyn Hardcastle, depending on where you live. So this was quite an unusual story, and I've heard quite a bit of hype surrounding it, so I thought I'd check it out because it sounded like something I'd enjoy. So our narrator wakes up one morning out in the woods with no recollection of who he is or how he got there. He witnesses what he believes is the murder of a young woman whose name he knows to be Anna, though he's not quite sure how he knows that bit of information. So, nearly immobile and eyes clamped shut with fright from what he believes he's just seen, the so-called murderer comes up behind him, puts a compass in his pocket, and tells him to head east. He soon finds himself at the Blackheath Manor and learns that he has been invited there for a party or a masquerade ball, actually, given by Lord and Lady Hardcastle. Now, he later learns that his name is Aidan Bishop, and he's trapped inside of a stranger's body. Then, a figure wearing a plague doctor's mask appears to him later on and tells him that in order to escape from the manor and return to his normal life, of which he has no memory at all, he must unveil the murder of Evenlyn Hardcastle, and will take place at 11 p.m. that evening. Now the kicker is that each time Aidan awakens, the day has been reset from the beginning, and he is now in the body of someone else, another guest of the manor. And in that process, he takes on the personality, the mannerisms, and the inclinations of his current host. He also learns that if he fails to uncover the name of the would-be murderer within 8 days or 8 hosts, he will return to the first day, memory wiped clean, and start the process all over again. And which he has supposedly done already numerous times. Matters become even more dire when Aidan learns that he is not the only one who is in this predicament, and that there are 2 other people also caught inside of this time loop. Oh, and there's also a knife-wielding footman who is out to murder all 3 of them. So this is a mind-bending, multi-layered, intricately plotted mystery with a huge cast of characters and a multitude of interwoven elements as we, along with our narrator, try to figure out what in the hell is going on. The tension builds right from the first page and really does not let up until the utterly surprising ending, during which everything is explained. This was an amazing, compelling, twisty story, and I can't even begin to imagine the amount of effort that the author put into plotting this story. It was really a fascinating novel, a gothic mystery. Think Agatha Christie meets Groundhog Day meets Quantum Leap. And in my opinion, is well worth the read. So the next book that I read in the month of December was entitled The Christmas Train, written by David Baldacci. Now, I've read a couple of David Baldacci novels in the past, but this one was completely different from those. I actually listened to this in audiobook format, and they added music and sound effects during certain parts of the book, which really added to the experience. So the story follows Tom Langdon, a disillusioned journalist and ex-war correspondent who finds himself on a train trip from Washington to Los Angeles, where he plans on spending the Christmas holiday with his girlfriend, who's a Hollywood voice work celebrity. Now, we learn that Tom has been banned from flying for a year after an altercation with a TSA agent. So deciding to make lemonade from lemons, chooses to write a story about train travel. So Tom embarks on his journey across country, and along the way meets all sorts of interesting and colorful characters. There's the couple planning on eloping. There's a famous movie director who's planning on creating a movie about train travel or trains. There's a retired priest, a former train engineer who lost his job due to budget cuts. There's a tarot card reader, several boisterous train personnel, a boys' choir, and even someone from his past. And there's even a mystery to be solved as items begin disappearing from the passengers' cabins, meaning that there's a thief on board among them. But worst of all, the blizzard of the century is bearing down on them. So the passengers and the crew are forced to come together if they want to survive this trip. And at some point, things are not looking too good for them. So this is really a fun and warm-hearted Christmas story about a man whose ride turns out to be quite an adventure, one he'll likely never forget. So this absolutely delightful tale had a little bit of everything. It had mystery, danger, crime, setbacks, suspense, romance, relationship intrigue, unscheduled train stops, a wedding, and of course, the miracles of Christmas, and enough twists and turns and surprises to prevent you from guessing the ending. So all in all, this was a sweet, delightful, magical story that just might give you the yearning to take a train trip for yourself. The next book that I read in December was entitled Spells and Scones, written by Bailey Cates. So this was another cozy mystery that I heard about actually on my library's podcast, and it sounded like a lot of fun. So the story takes place in Savannah and follows a magical witchy baker named Katie Lightfoot, who is catering a book signing at the bookstore next door to her bakery. So a huge crowd gathers for the event, and as the author, Dr. Dana, arrives, a few people loudly protest and heckle this self-help guru, especially because of her radical trust philosophy, which has proven to be detrimental to many relationships, and something that I actually found kind of creepy. It involves tracking every movement that your partner makes, adding GPS tracking to their phone, etc. So you can see why a lot of people didn't really care too much for that philosophy. Some of the people there to protest were very, very angry, as some of their marriages were actually ruined due to Dr. Dana's advice. So after the author's reading, the author is then ushered to the back of the store to cite some books. Not long afterwards, she is found laying on the floor, dead, with the scent of almonds in the air. A murder by cyanide, as it turns out. A woman who was standing over the body when it was discovered then becomes the prime suspect. So the woman who's been accused of the murder turns out to be a witch named Angie Kissel. Well, actually, she's a former witch as she stopped practicing magic. She was also divorced after following the relationship advice given by Dr. Dana. So Quinn, the detective, considers this case cut and dry, positive that Angie is the one who killed the author. So Katie kind of delves into the mystery herself, and as she does so, she comes across several other possible suspects. So this was a light, fun, witchy, cozy mystery. As it turns out, it was book 6 in the Magical Mystery Bakery series, but it wasn't necessary to read the other ones, as this was a standalone book. Though this wasn't an overly complex or twisty mystery, it was a satisfying read with whimsical characters, and I may read more books in the series in the future because it was a lot of fun. So the next book that I read this month was entitled The City of Heavenly Fire by Cassandra Clare. Yes, I finally did it. I finished the Mortal Instruments series, and I really enjoyed this series. Now, as usual, I can't say too much about this particular book, given that it's the 6th book in a series, without spoiling it for those of you who haven't read it. I will say that the fascinating tale of the Shadow Hunters versus the ultimate evil comes to a conclusion in this book in an explosive showdown, of which there's kind of a bittersweet feeling, bittersweet ending. I mean, it is a war after all, and people die, even beloved characters. But I shan't say any more about that. I will say that this story was one hell of an action-packed roller coaster ride with a satisfying ending, tragic deaths notwithstanding. I really love the original premise of the heavenly fire and how it worked in this book. It was really impressive. And this story had the best villain ever. All in all, this was a book with plenty of adventure, action, and yes, some heartbreak. And I'm really glad that I ended up reading this series. So the last book that I read in December was entitled The Afterlife of Holly Chase, written by Cynthia Hand. So this is a contemporary retelling of the book A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens, but the author creates something entirely original and new. So the story follows Holly Chase, a completely unlikable girl who is visited by 3 spirits who show her her past, present, and tragic future if she doesn't change her ways. So, being the bitchy, entitled, spoiled brat that she is, she shrugs it off, actually laughs at the ghosts, and then days later dies. So we then fast forward to 5 years to Holly's afterlife, where she's been recruited as the ghost of Christmas past for Project Scrooge, a company that chooses a new Scrooge every year, another self-absorbed, self-centered grouch, in the hopes of converting this person to change their ways and to get a new outlook on life. But this year's Scrooge really throws Holly for a loop. And when she makes a rash decision to go completely off script, her whole life, or should I say her afterlife, completely changes. Now, I can't say too much more about this without giving anything away. Let me just say that this was a thought-provoking, heartwarming, and delightful Christmas-time read whose emotional and surprising ending brought a tear or two to my eye. Though I would say that this story could be read any time of the year. It doesn't necessarily have to be read during the Christmas season. But I found it thoroughly enjoyable. I'd recommend it if you're looking for a holiday book with plenty of heart. And that is it for my December mid-month wrap-up. I'll be posting the second part of my wrap-up at the end of December or beginning of January, one never knows. So that is it. As always, I thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate all your support. And also, I'd appreciate if you click the like button below, as that really helps me out. So I will talk to you in the next video. Roger and out.